The sun was setting over the dusty plains of Arizona, casting long shadows across the land. The air smelled of dry earth and scorched wood, a scent that clung to everything in this part of the world. At the edge of a small, humble ranch stood a man named Jacob Reed, his boots caked with mud and his hat pulled low over his tired eyes. He had been a farmer all his life, working tirelessly under the unrelenting desert sun, but lately something felt off about his little patch of paradise. It started when the pigs refused to eat. Jacob scratched his stubbled chin as he watched the animals circling around their trough, snorting and grumbling, but never once lowering their noses into the feed. It wasn't like them. These were creatures who lived for food. Yet here they were, acting as though the very sight of it repulsed them. "What's gotten into you lot?" he muttered aloud, leaning against a weathered fence post. His voice carried a note of frustration, but there was also an underlying thread of worry. Animals didn't just stop eating without reason, especially not these hogs. Little did Jacob know, the mystery ran deeper than mere hunger strikes or spoiled grain. Much deeper. The ranch itself sat nestled between two rolling hills, surrounded by stretches of golden grasses that swayed gently in the breeze. To the east lay a dense forest where coyotes howled at night, and to the west stretched a river whose waters shimmered like liquid silver under the moonlight. Despite its beauty, the area carried a sense of foreboding, as if secrets from another time still lingered beneath the surface of the soil. Jacob sighed heavily and grabbed a shovel propped up against the barn wall. If the pigs wouldn't eat, then maybe it was time to investigate further. Perhaps the problem lay within the trough itself. With slow, deliberate movements, he approached the wooden structure, its surface splintered and worn from years of use. As he leaned down to examine it more closely, the faintest whisper wind kicked up dust around him, swirling almost mischievously before settling back onto the ground. He began digging. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Dirt flew up in clumps, scattering across the parched earth. But then, after several minutes of relentless shoveling, something caught his attention, a glint of metal peeking out from beneath the soil. Jacob froze, his breath hitching in his chest. Slowly, hesitantly, he brushed away the dirt until the object came fully into view, a rusted iron lockbox, its edges corroded but unmistakably solid. His heart raced. "What in God's name?" Jacob whispered, his hands trembling as he reached for the box. Pulling it free from the ground, he examined it closely, noting the intricate carvings etched along its sides. They depicted scenes of gunfights, stagecoaches, and men on horseback, all hallmarks of the Wild West era. Whoever buried this thing must have wanted it hidden, and well, but why? As night fell, the stars emerged one by one, painting the sky above the ranch in a tapestry of light. Jacob sat alone on the porch of his cabin, the mysterious lockbox resting beside him. The pigs, now curiously calm, wandered aimlessly nearby, seemingly unaware of the treasure their refusal to eat had unearthed. Jacob stared at the box, his mind racing with possibilities. Was it gold, coins, jewels, or perhaps something far darker, something tied to the violent history of this land? With shaking hands, he pried open the lid. Inside lay a fortune beyond anything Jacob could have imagined. Stacks of gleaming gold coins, each bearing the mark of old Spanish mints. There were also several bars of pure gold, wrapped carefully in cloth, alongside documents written in elegant script. One paper, in particular, caught his eye, a letter addressed to someone named Thomas Hargrove, dated 1865. It spoke of betrayal, greed, and a plan gone horribly wrong. According to the letter, the gold belonged to a group of outlaws known as the Black Ridge Gang, infamous throughout the territory for their ruthless exploits. Jacob read the words aloud, his voice barely audible above the crickets chirping in the distance. "We buried it beneath the pig trough, thinking no one would dare look there. But now, we fear our secret will be discovered." He paused, staring at the document in disbelief. "Whoever we are..." Suddenly, a sound broke through the silence, a distant hoofbeat, growing louder with every passing second. Jacob's had snapped up, his blood running cold. Could it be possible? Had someone followed him, somehow knowing what he'd found? "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "No, nobody knows." But then the rider appeared. A lone figure emerged from the darkness, silhouetted against the glowing horizon. Closer inspection revealed a man dressed in tattered clothing, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. In his hand, he held a revolver, its barrel pointed directly at Jacob. "Evening, stranger," the man drawled, his voice rough and gravelly. "I hear you've been digging around places you shouldn't." Jacob swallowed hard, clutching the lockbox tighter. "Who are you?" he demanded, trying to keep his voice steady. The man chuckled darkly, tipping his hat back slightly to reveal piercing blue eyes. "Name's Levi Kane. I'm just saying, that gold ain't yours. Not anymore." The confrontation unfolded under the watchful gaze of the heavens, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Jacob stood firm, despite the fear clawing at his insides. "I don't know what you're talking about," he lied, his knuckles whitening around the edges of the box. Levi Kane laughed again, the sound echoing eerily across the empty plains. "Don't play dumb, farmer. You dug it up yourself. Now, hand it over nice and easy and nobody gets hurt." Jacob hesitated, his mind racing. He thought of his family, his home, the life he'd built with his own two hands. And yet, the temptation of the gold weighed heavily on him. What if he kept it? Could he really turn away such wealth? But then, another voice entered the fray, a soft, feminine whisper carried on the wind. "Jacob," it called, faint but unmistakable. Startled, Jacob turned toward the sound, searching the shadows for its source. Levi, too, seemed startled, his grip tightening on his weapon. "Who's there?" he barked, scanning the area warily. From behind the barn stepped a woman, her form cloaked in darkness but her presence undeniable. Her hair flowed like silk in the moonlight, and her eyes gleamed with an otherworldly intensity. "Leave him be, Levi," she said, her voice calm yet commanding. "This is not your fight." Levi sneered, raising his revolver higher. "Stay out of this, Eleanor. This gold belongs to the gang, and I'll do whatever it takes to get it back." Eleanor shook her head slowly, her expression unreadable. "You don't understand, do you? That gold isn't cursed, it's haunted. Every man who touched it met a terrible end. Do you really want to risk your soul for something so fleeting?" For a moment, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. Then, unexpectedly, Levi lowered his gun. "Fine," he growled, turning his horse sharply. "Take your cursed gold, then. But mark my words, farmer, if trouble comes knocking, don't come crying to me." And with that, he rode off into the night, leaving Jacob alone once more with Eleanor. "What now?" Jacob asked finally, his voice tinged with exhaustion. "Do I take the gold or leave it?" Eleanor gazed at him steadily, her features softened by the pale glow of the moon. "That choice is yours alone," she replied. "But remember this. Wealth can bring happiness, but it can also destroy. Be careful what you wish for," Jacob read. And with those parting words, she vanished into the darkness, leaving only silence in her wake. Jacob stared at the lockbox, his heart heavy with uncertainty. For the first time in his life, he realized that some treasures weren't meant to be claimed. Slowly, deliberately, he rebared the gold beneath the pig trough, covering it with fresh soil and marking the spot with a simple stone. Then he returned to his cabin, climbed into bed, and closed his eyes, grateful for quiet peace of his simple existence. Little did he know, the real adventure was only beginning. The days that followed were anything but ordinary. Jacob awoke the next morning to find the ranch enveloped in an eerie stillness, as though the land itself was holding its breath. The pigs, now back to their usual ravenous selves, grunted and snuffled around the trough, completely oblivious to the treasure buried mere inches beneath their noses. Yet, despite their normal behavior, Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching him. He ventured out into the fields, his plow slicing to the dry earth with practiced ease. The sun beat down relentlessly, casting sweat across his brow, but his thoughts remained far from the task at hand. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of the barn door, sent a shiver down his spine. It wasn't fear exactly. It was more like anticipation, a gnawing sense that the peace he'd known for so long was about to be shattered. By midday, Jacob decided to take a break under the shade of an ancient oak tree that stood near the edge of property. Leaning against the rough bark, He gazed out over the expanse of golden grasses, wondering if he had made the right decision in leaving the gold untouched. Perhaps Levi Kane had been bluffing. Perhaps Eleanor's warnings were nothing more than superstition. But deep down, Jacob knew better. He had seen a look in her eyes, the same look one might see in the eyes of a ghost. As he sat there, lost in thought, a sound caught his attention, a soft crunching noise, as though someone was walking carefully through the tall grass. Jacob froze, his muscles tensing instinctively. Slowly, he turned his head, peering into the distance. At first, he saw nothing. Then, emerging from the tree line, came a figure clad entirely in black, a man with a lean, wiry frame and a face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. Jacob's heart pounded in his chest as the stranger approached. "Can I help you?" he called out, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. The man stopped a few paces away, tipping his hat slightly to reveal sharp, calculating eyes. "Name's Silas," he said, his tone clipped and businesslike. "I hear tell there's something unusual go on around here." Jacob frowned, gripping the handle of his shovel tightly. "Unusual? Like what?" Silas smirked, crossing his arms over his chest. "Like buried gold, for starters. Or maybe visions of women who ain't supposed to exist." His gaze narrowed, pinning Jacob in place. "You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" Night descended quickly, swallowing the landscape in darkness. Inside the cabin, Jacob paced nervously, the flickering light of the oil lamp casting long shadows across the walls. Silas sat at the small wooden table, his boots propped up casually, a cup of coffee steaming in front of him. Despite the casual demeanor, Jacob could feel the weight of the man's scrutiny pressing down on him. "You're either very brave or very foolish," Silas said finally, breaking the silence. "Burying that kind of money without taking a piece for yourself? Most men wouldn't have the guts to walk away." Jacob sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not mine to take. And besides," he hesitated, choosing his words carefully, "there's a price attached to it, isn't there? A price I'm not willing to pay." Silas raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "And what price is that?" Before Jacob could respond, a sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, sending the flame of the lamp dancing wildly. Both men froze, their eyes darting toward the source of the disturbance. Then, without warning, the door burst open, slamming against the wall with a thunderous crack. Standing in the doorway was none other than Eleanor, her form silhouetted against the starlit sky. Her presence filled the room with an almost palpable tension, forcing both men to rise from their seats. "Silas," she greeted coolly, her voice carrying a note of disapproval. "I should have known you'd show up sooner or later." Silas grinned wolfishly, tipping his hat in mock respect. "Eleanor, always a pleasure, even if you do seem determined to ruin my fun." Eleanor ignored the jibe, stepping further into the cabin, her gaze locked onto Jacob, her expression unreadable. "You've done well so far," she said softly, "but the test has only just begun." "What test?" Jacob demanded, frustration creeping into his voice. "What are you talking about?" Eleanor hesitated, as though weighing how much to reveal. "The gold is more than just a pile of coins," she explained finally. "It's a key, a gateway, if you will, to another time. Those who possess it can unlock secrets long forgotten, truths that some would kill to keep hidden." Jacob stared at her, stunned. "Are you saying this gold can change history?" "In a manner of speaking," Eleanor replied. "But beware, Jacob. Knowledge is power, but it comes at a cost. Once unleashed, there's no turning back." The following week passed in a blur of strange occurrences. Shadows moved where there should have been none. Whispers carried on the wind spoke of battles fought and lives lost. And always, lurking just beyond periphery of Jacob's vision, was the figure of Eleanor, watching, waiting, guiding him toward a fate he couldn't yet comprehend. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jacob found himself drawn to the riverbank, compelled by a force he couldn't explain. Kneeling by the water's edge, he dipped his fingers into the cool, flowing current, staring into its depths as though searching for answers. Suddenly, the surface rippled unnaturally, forming a perfect circle of light. Within the circle, Images began to appear. Scenes of gunfights, stagecoaches, and men riding hard across the plains. Jacob gasped, recoiling instinctively. But then, curiosity got the better of him, and he leaned closer, desperate to understand what he was seeing. The images shifted, blending together until they coalesced into a single moment, a moment frozen in time. There, standing amidst the chaos of battle, was a younger version of himself, dressed in the garb of a soldier, his face etched with determination. "It's me," Jacob whispered, his voice trembling. "But how?" Behind him, Eleanor materialized silently, her presence grounding him in reality. "That is your ancestor," she explained gently. "A man who lived during the Civil War, a man whose choices shaped the course of history. And now, through the power of the gold, you have the chance to walk in his footsteps." Jacob turned to her, his mind reeling. "Why me? Why now?" Eleanor smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the glow of the setting sun. "Because, Jacob Reed, you are the keeper of the legacy. The past, the present, and the future all converge in you." In the end, Jacob faced a choice greater than any he had ever imagined: to wield the power of the gold and reshape the world as he saw fit, or to let it remain buried, content with the simple life he had built for himself. As the stars twinkled above and the river sang its eternal song, Jacob closed his eyes, embracing the weight of his decision. And somewhere, deep beneath the pig trough, the gold waited patiently, its secret safe for another day.